If I did tell you, you'd probably think I was just exaggerating. I would never want to fight in a war again. I've seen and done enough horrible things to last me a lifetime. This is the baggage that my son carried with him when he stepped off that bus that sunny July day at Fort Nathan Hale, New Haven, Connecticut. Over the next several months, we missed the signs that Jeffrey was in trouble. We had no way of knowing that during his post-deployment briefing at Camp Pendleton, he was told to watch the direction that he was going in his survey, or else he'd be kept there another 2 to 4 months. He was careful from then on. In July, he went to the Cape with his girlfriend, and she found him rather distant. He didn't want to walk the beach. He later told a friend at college that he had seen enough sand to last him a lifetime. At his sister's wedding in August, he told his grandmother, you could be in a room full of people, but you could feel so alone. He resumed college in 2003. That fall, we found out that Jeff had been vomiting just about every day since his return, and that kind of kept up right until the day he died. On Christmas Eve, his sister came home early to see how he was doing. He had been drinking. He standing by the refrigerator, and he grabbed his dog tags, and he tossed them to her, and he called himself a murderer. We were to find out that these dog tags included 2 Iraqi soldiers that he feels, or he knows, he's personally responsible for their deaths. His private therapist, who saw him the last 7 weeks of his life, said he didn't wear them as a trophy, but he wore them to honor these men. He had a nightmare in February. He told me he was having a dream that they were coming after him in an alleyway. After his death, we kind of checked the VA records, and he had talked to them also about having nightmares in which he was running from alleyway to alleyway. Spring break 2004 began, 3 months in which our family watched the son and brother we knew fall apart. He was depressed and drinking. When college classes resumed, he found attending classes very difficult. He had panic attacks, feeling that the other students were staring at him, even though he realized they weren't. He was placed on Klonopin and Prozac to see if it could keep him in class. Jeff's problems just worsened. He was having trouble sleeping, nightmares, poor appetite, isolating himself in his room. He was unable to focus on studies, so he could not take his finals. An excellent athlete, his balance was badly compromised by the mixture of Klonopin and alcohol. He confided in his younger sister that he had a rope and a tree picked out near the brook behind our home, but told her, don't worry, I'd never do that. I wouldn't hurt Mom and Dad. He was adamant that the Marines not be told, fearing a Section 8 and not wanting the stigma that is connected to PTSD to follow him throughout his life. He finally went to the VA after being assured that they were not part of the military and would not relay any information without Jeff's permission. His dad called and explained what was happening with our son, and they said it was classic PTSD and that he should come in as soon as possible. The problem was getting Jeffrey to actually go in. And he kind of, every day it was tomorrow, I'll go in tomorrow, I'm tired. He just didn't have the energy to get up. The day he went in, he blew a .328, and it was decided he needed to stay. As it was decided, he needed to stay. It took 6 employees to take Jeffrey down. He had gotten out the door and ran out into the parking area. Involuntarily committed for 4 days, the state did nothing but make him feel like he was being warehoused. After seeing an admitting psychiatrist, he would not see another one until the day of his discharge. After answering in the affirmative that he was thinking of harming himself and revealing the 3 methods, overdose, suffocation, or hanging, he was released on June 1st, 2003, a Tuesday. We found out later that he told them on Friday, the day that he was admitted, that he had a hose to choke himself. None of this was ever relayed to us. They told us while he was there that he would not be assessed for PTSD until he was alcohol-free. But Jeffrey was using this alcohol as self-medication, and he had told us often that's the only way he could sleep at night. That we might, and the VA said that we might have to consider kicking him out of the house so he would hit rock bottom and then realize he needed his help. That wasn't an option for us. On his discharge interview, Jeff said there were 3 phone calls that the psychiatrist took. One of them being just before he was going to tell her about the bumps in the road, the children they were told not to stop their vehicles for and just not to look back. He decided not to after she took the call, feeling she wasn't really interested. On June 3rd, on a Dunkin' Donut run, and this is 2 days after he was released from the hospital, he totaled our car. Was it a suicide attempt? We're never going to know. No drinking was involved. I was terrified I was losing my little boy. I asked him where he was. He touched his chest and he said, "Right here, Mom." On the 5th, he arrived at HCC, Holyoke Community College, where he was a student. But because of not taking the finals, he would not be graduating. But he arrived there to watch the graduation of his sister. This was supposed to be his graduation also. How he drove his car there, we'll never know. He was so impaired. We managed to get him home, but his behavior got worse. He was very depressed. My parents, who saw their grandson often, never saw him like this. His sisters and brother-in-law and my dad took him back to the VA. He did not want my husband to go because he felt he was going to be involuntarily committed again. They were waiting for him, but he refused to go in the building. He was intelligent, didn't want to get committed again like the weekend before. They decided, without consulting someone with the authority to commit him involuntarily, that he was neither suicidal or homicidal. There's nothing they could do. Our daughters called home in a panic, saying it didn't look like they were going to keep their brother. In their records, they say the grandfather pleaded for someone to help his grandson. Neither our veterans nor their families should ever have to beg for the care they should be entitled to. My father lost his only brother in World War II. He was 22 years old. He was now watching his only grandson self-destructing at 23 because of another war. Kevin and I went through the rooms when we knew Jeff was coming back. We took his knives, bottles, anything we felt he could harm himself with, a dog leash. I took a step stool, anything that I thought could trigger something in his mind. His car was disabled not only to protect himself, but to protect others from Jeffrey. Kevin called the civilian authorities. They said, we can't touch him, he's drinking. My child was struggling to survive, and we didn't know who to turn to. There was no follow-up call from the VA, no outreach, though they knew he was in crisis. We had no guidance. What to say to him, how to handle the situation. You hear a lot about supporting our troops, but I'll tell you, we felt isolated, abandoned, and alone. While the rest of the country lived on, going to Disney World, shopping, living their daily lives, our days consisted of constant fear, apprehension, helplessness, while we watched this young man being consumed by this cancer that ravaged his soul. I sat on the deck with this person who was impersonating my son and listened to him while he recounted bits and pieces of his time in Iraq. Then he would grind his fist into his hand and he'd say, "You could never understand." On Friday, June 11th, around midnight, my daughter got a call from a girl down the street. She asked me, "Where's your son?" And I said, "Deb's, he's in his room, he's sleeping." Well, apparently not. He had climbed out the window and gotten into this girl's car. He wanted some beer. This girl who had known Jeffrey all her life was a little bit scared of him. When I saw him get out of the car, I froze. Jeff was dressed in his camis with 2 K-bars, a modified pellet gun, which the police wouldn't know, and carrying a 6-pack. He had just wanted that beer. There was a sad smile on his face like a lost soul. When I told him how concerned I was about him, he said, "Don't worry, Mom. No matter what I do, I always come back."
So later that evening, we had decided that we were going to try to go out because he had become reclusive in the house. We were going to try to go out for a steak dinner the following night. At about 11:30, 11:45, Jeffrey asked me for the second time within the past 10 days if he could just sit in my lap and I could rock him for a while. And we did. We sat there for about 45 minutes and I was rocking Jeff and we were in total silence. As his private therapist that we had hired said, it was his last harbor and his last place of refuge. The next day I came home. It was about 7:15. I held Jeff one last time as I lowered his body from the rafters and took the hose from around his neck.
Kevin and Joyce Lucey. Their son, Marine Lance Corporal Jeffrey Lucey, served 5 months in Iraq in 2003 with the 6th Motor Transport Battalion. Almost a year later, he committed suicide, June 22, 2004. He was 23 years old. We'll be back in a minute.
And the river opens for the righteous, 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 and the river opens for the righteous. Someday I was walking with my brother, and he wondered what's on my mind. I said what I believe in my soul ain't what I see with my eyes, and we can't